So as we start tonight, and guys, I'm going to just start with some unity here. As we've all been awake for the past few years, there has been so many crazy things in the world happening left and right. Let's check this out.
Peace shattered in Portland as national attention turned to yet another ideological clash echoing in the streets. Saturday, right-wing extremists went head-to-head with left-wing anti-fascists in what has become a predictably ugly street duel.
Another school shooting here in this country.
Hard to believe we are talking about that again. And of course, we do want to begin with that shooting this morning there in California.
2 students were killed and 3 others injured. The suspect, a 16-year-old boy, is now in custody in critical condition.
So I'm sure a lot of you guys have been hearing about some of this stuff. Over the past several years alone, we've seen a profound increase in gun violence, as well as a widening gap between different points of view that have grown more and more hateful toward one another. From 2014 to 2017 alone, gun homicides have increased 30%. And the data is still being collected in terms of like how the past couple of years have potentially even increased those numbers.
In regards to politics, when we're kind of thinking about politics, the stats are crazy. In 1994, actually when Braden was born, 1994, baby, let's go. People have grown and really increased in how much different political parties have disliked each other. So in 1994, 16 to 17% of people were really showing a dislike towards one another. Where a little bit later on, you have 38 to 43% now are viewing the political party that's opposite of theirs really unfavorably. And this is really the stat that blows my mind. That 26 to 36% even see the other party as a threat to the nation's well-being, so to everybody's well-being.
Yeah, which I know these are kind of startling, and for us personally, we know like in the midst of all this, all the news you see, it's easy to just look at it and only see chaos and destruction. Yet at the same time, all of that's going on, I think there's powerful moves toward unity and wholeness as well.
We started this journey together in 2015, and we know our destination. Opportunity for all on a healthy planet. In short, we have set our sights on a fair globalization. The good news is that the 2030 agenda is coming to life, and we are making progress. But let us be clear, we are far from where we need to be. We are off track. That is why today, as requested by our political declaration, I'm issuing a global call for a decade of action to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030.
Do you guys know what the United Nations are? Okay, I'll just explain really quick. So there's different ambassadors, people that represent different nations all around the world that then get together. And that was a clip of everybody getting together. Does that help? Does that make sense? So this group of people, who we call the United Nations, have created goals. They've gathered together and they've been thinking through goals that they want to come together and experience unity on, specifically to lay out a vision for a better future, for a better world, and strategically outline how to get there by the year of 2030. And so, what I want to do, all of us right now, let's just take the first goal, for example, which is no poverty. Specifically, no extreme poverty. By 2030, the goal is that extreme poverty will be gone or eradicated, that everyone will have access to clean drinking water, and systematic hunger, that means hunger throughout the whole world, will be put to an end, where people are going hungry, which is such a life-giving and redemptive step to remind ourselves when things look really dark. And so now with both of these drastic situations occurring at the same time, many of us look out upon the world. And it's obvious that there are 2 things, destruction and beauty. And so there's a lot of people, guys, take a look at this. There's a lot of people building their house. There's a lot of people who are building their lives on a foundation that is destructive. And there are also those who are building their lives on a foundation that creates a better world.
Scriptures actually talk about this, and they speak about the kingdom of God and the kingdom of the world both advancing at the same time. Yet the promise of Jesus is that the kingdom of God will prevail, that the promise of the kingdom of the world will actually become the kingdom of God, that our world will be redeemed, and God will reign and rule both in our hearts and on the earth. And so the invitation of Jesus, to me, like as we look at Scripture and just the world, I think the invitation of Jesus is to live our lives in a way that brings about redemption in the world, and to pray that God's will be done on earth as is in heaven, and to participate in this by putting into practice what Jesus taught, loving God and loving others.
And you guys, that's just what we want to talk about tonight. Just honestly, that's what we want to talk about tonight, is practicing the way of Jesus. In Jesus' most famous teaching, which is the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus closes with this short parable. Let's all look at this. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. So same thing. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but like we grew up not just thinking this, but actually being very bluntly taught this, that this whole verse, that this whole passage that was talking about believing in Jesus as Lord or not, that if you check all the right belief boxes, if you say the sinner's prayer, that means you're good. Like you're building your life on a solid rock, usually meaning you're going to heaven. But if you don't do that, like you don't check all the belief boxes, if you don't say the sinner's prayer, if you don't believe in Jesus, then you're building your house on sinking sand, usually meaning that you're going to hell. But if you look at the passage that we just read, it doesn't say that. It says if you put this into practice, if you put Jesus' teachings into practice, then you will be a wise person who's building your house on a rock.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's really deep. And I think that's so cool, because what Jesus is talking about is a way of life. And in fact, early followers of Jesus, you guys weren't even called, they weren't called Christians or evangelicals or things like that. They were called followers of the way. And this is because they recognized that this was kind of an entire way of life. And after all, Jesus in his context was a Jewish rabbi, which most of us, I know me included, when Braden was kind of showing me this stuff, I'm like, man, I don't have something pop to my mind when I think of a Jewish rabbi. And so with that, I just want to be able to let a Jewish rabbi actually explain.
Now, of course, there is beliefs in Judaism, the belief in one God, but belief is secondary to action. That, so to speak, we have thoughts and beliefs, but if they don't translate into actions, in other words, down-to-earth actions, the way we treat each other, then what good is a lot of great beliefs means? And this is the gospel truth that Jesus was teaching. That I don't care what you believe, but I care what you do. And you better take care of people and feed people. You can have all the great theological beliefs in the world and your little Havaraian Judaism or your little unity that meets, but if you're not changing the world, if you're not transforming the world, then you have nice beliefs, that's great. Who cares? Bring it into action, bring it down to earth. And that's what Judaism teaches. It's a down-to-earth religion.
So that's Rabbi David Zaslow. He's super blunt, but what he's trying to get at is the reality that Jewish rabbis, which is what Jesus was, he was a Jewish rabbi, well, they talked a lot about doctrine, theology, just what they believed. They were mostly concerned about everyday down-to-earth stuff, of how you lived. And they invited people to model their lives after the rabbi that they followed.
And if you're familiar with the stories of Jesus, this is what he did. He told his disciples to follow him. In every sense of the word, he taught his disciples that the greatest commandments were to love God and to love others. That following Jesus in Jesus' mind was not dominantly about buying into a set of beliefs. It was about a whole entire way of life. And it's about living in such a way that brings heaven down to earth. Oh no, what did I say?
Okay, so listen, I know if you've been around church for a while, like what we're saying might sound odd if you've just been immersed in.
What is heresy? Wait, what is heresy? I don't even know what that word means.
So heresy is like a term people have used throughout church history, like when they like disagree with something, that they think something's like wrong.
Okay.
So for some of us that might sound like what JT just said, that like following Jesus isn't about beliefs primarily.
I'm never going to be invited back. I thought, oh my God.
I just want to clarify really quick what we're talking about. We're not saying that Jesus isn't the way and the truth and life. We're simply saying that I think we tend to only talk about how Jesus is the truth, but Jesus also said he is the way and the life, and we want to talk about that for a good amount of time. And so what we're talking about, what this looks like in real life, I think is the key word that Jesus uses: practice. Advancing the cause of Christ, becoming people of love as Jesus is, becoming more peaceful, joyful, patient, kind, gentle, self-control, the things we talk about all the time. Those things all take practice. It takes not just talking about them, but actually practicing them until it becomes more of a natural part of who we are.
Okay, so you're saying like we can take something like happiness or joy. Like
Yeah.
we all want to be happy. And so, man, I'm just tripping on this. So psychologists basically over the past several years have started to formally study this and call it positive psychology. And a lot of what they're finding out is actually what we're talking about, and these practices seem to be true.
Yeah.
Us are born with a certain range of happiness that we fall in most of the time. And even when really good or really bad things happen to us, we kind of tend to return to our set point.
And while 50% is genetic, amazingly, our circumstances, like what job we have or how much money we have, our social status, our health, those things that many of us are told to focus on, they only account for 10% of the differences in our happiness.
Most people are kind of stunned at how small that is, but that still leaves 40% unaccounted for. And so our theory suggests that there is a great deal you can do to become happier, and that 40% is left for kind of intentional behavior, things that we can do on a regular basis to become happier.
So I'll be honest with you guys, some of you know this, some of you don't, but I struggle with like a trinity of mental illnesses. I struggle with clinical depression, anxiety, and chronic fatigue, which a lot of you are familiar with depression and anxiety. Chronic fatigue basically means I'm like diagnosably tired all the time. So for me, it's honestly really tough sometimes to stay positive. So when I learned about some of this stuff, it was shocking to me that according to positive psychology, while there's a lot in life I can't control, like my illnesses and stuff like that, there's actually a good amount that I can control. That there are intentional activities that I can do, at 40%, in order to practice and cultivate happiness, which I think this is super good news. For those of us who just feel like we're just not naturally peaceful people, or patient people, or happy people, or you fill in the blank, whatever it is that you struggle with, no matter who you are, through practice, we can become more and more people of love while still being authentically us, following Jesus. So that's good news for those who struggle with depression, like myself, that we can intentionally practice becoming more joyful over time. It's good news for those of us in here who struggle with anxiety. We can intentionally practice becoming more peace over time. I think it's also good news for those of us who have been hurt, that we can intentionally practice healing and forgiveness, taking steps toward that. And I think it's good news for those who are angry, especially those who are angry about the injustice in the world, that we can intentionally work to redeem the world.
So practicing this does all this and more.
Yeah.
Over the years, Christians have called these particular practices spiritual disciplines. That's what comes to my mind. Spiritual disciplines are seeking to intentionally really do the things that Jesus did. And I think just as one pastor puts it, living the lifestyle of Jesus in order to experience the life of Jesus. And that these spiritual disciplines that we're trying to include and talk about tonight are things like community, celebration, justice, generosity, simplicity, silence, and solitude. That one's tough for me. I'm kind of ADD and I always have coffee running through my veins.
I love that one.
And just more beautiful, life-giving things. And I think for us, man, we've just been able to personally find these things really freeing.
So many of us long for a way of life in Jesus that closes the gap between how we want to live and how we actually live. What we need are practices and supportive environment where we can take risks to follow the way of Jesus in the details of our lives.
I don't know about you guys, man, but I want to live this out. I want to practice this. I want to be a part of just an intentional community here, right here, as youth, as young people. You know, I'm 30. I'm not that much older than you guys. Okay, I'm twice as old as you. That is pretty old, actually. I'm kind of old. But like Braden mentioned even in the prayer and the leaders and Delaney and the worship and the songs that she's choosing, that we would intentionally participate in the meaningful. And yeah, that fires me up.
Yeah, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to go on a journey between now and the end of the school year. And we're going to be doing this both at middle school group and high school group. That's why we're co-teaching.
Yeah.
And all of our conversations are going to circle around these different practices. And we're going to learn where they're found in the life of Jesus, the studies behind the benefit of them, like the ones you just saw, what it looks like in other communities, and then we're going to figure out together what it could look like in ours, which I think is going to give us a lot to consider and discuss about our own lives and the world. Questions like, what in our lives and our world makes us ache? What do we wish we could change?
And what are simple, everyday practices that we can do to accomplish these things?
Guys, these are the conversations that we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of the school year. So, can you just close in prayer, JT?
Yeah, dude, let's pray. God, thank you so much for your grace that just empowers us to be here. Thank you that we can know that this is a safe place, that this is a consistent place, and that this is a place where we can feel that we're a part of a family of love, a family of forgiveness, where we can learn and explore what it means to be friends, and where we could, by your love and by your Spirit, be able to put things into practice that help participate in creating a better world. We just pray for these last couple worship songs. We can just maybe just use the space to be able to worship you, God, through thinking, through singing out loud, through looking at the lyrics, just really being able to use this time to be able to think, meditate on you. And we just thank you for all these things. In Jesus' name, amen.